Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Settlers, the series where we build towns, villages, and settlements throughout the worlds of Conan Exiles. Today is Season 1, Episode 5, and we're going to be building some stores for the residents of Skylake Village. So, without further ado, let's get started. I said in the last episode that I was going to be constructing some extra stores around the village, and though I did have one or two ideas already in mind, a few comments added some suggestions that I thought were definitely worth including. Initially, the plan was that Skylake Village wouldn't have access to a massive amount of metal, and thus I planned not to really include an extensive blacksmith. However, a comment pointed out that blacksmiths and millers were critical parts of medieval life, and it kind of felt wrong to omit them. There is also the issue of the Numidian pieces including metal accents, which, considering how large the village has become, is actually a significant amount of metal just in the accents and detailing on those pieces alone. Therefore, I chose to include 4 major stores in this episode that should play a critical part in the infrastructure and economy of Skylake Village. The first of those stores is, of course, the blacksmith. Historically, the blacksmith played a critical role in the stability and infrastructure of medieval villages and towns. Seeing as the people of Skylake Village are natural fishermen, it's not too far of a stretch to assume that they'd also have access to some trade routes to bring in metal, which makes for a fairly law-friendly way to incorporate the settlement having access to metal that isn't in their immediate area. However, just because the settlement now has access to metal doesn't mean they're going to become a militarised force with guards everywhere. Most of their metal will go towards buildings, storage and appliances, though of course some would be forged into arrows, swords and shields for those that want to buy them. The blacksmith design is quite simple. It's a 2-storey building built in the usual material palette with an outdoor open-air workshop, a storefront on the ground floor with wares on show, and some small living quarters upstairs for Bohran the blacksmith, a metalworker of many years' experience. He's a simple, friendly man that enjoys working metal and making coin during the day and a nice flagon of ale at night. His assistant Jarl, who lives in the village, is fairly new to blacksmithing and is improving his craft under Bohran's tutorage, hoping one day to travel to a larger town and set up his own blacksmithing store. So with the blacksmith done, the next step is the grain mill. This is one of the most challenging builds in this settlement, not because it's difficult, but because it's going to be pretty difficult to make it look like a functional mill. There are no real decorations or workstations in the base game that can fit the purpose of this build, so I had to get a bit creative with this design. The build itself is a circular design with 2 wing rooms on either side, and the mill will be 2 stories high in total. This is a really simple build design as I didn't want the miller or his workers to live in the build, so there only really needs to be the work area and a small amount of storage space. I chose to go with an open-air design at the front of the build, which did cause a slight stability issue later on, but it's definitely worth it to have this open-faced workshop, which I think looks really nice and shows off the interior of the mill a bit better. Definitely helps to make this workshop look a bit different from the others. I also chose to build some very simple silos on the right-hand side behind the build to store the grain that will be milled here. They're fairly thin silos as I didn't want them to be massive as real-life silos often are, but I think they work for the build and add to the feeling of the grain mill actually being a functional workplace. As for making the actual grain milling function of this build, I had a couple of options. The first was to add tables inside the build with grinders on them. This would have turned the grain mill into a more factory style, requiring more workers to hand mill small amounts of grain at a time. I considered it, but nah, not good enough, we can do better. Instead, I chose to add a small wheel of pain in the centre of the mill on the ground floor. Thematically, this wheel of pain will be used to grind grain down, to then be stored in silos and used around the village. Considering the massive lack of options for making something like this, especially without mods, I think this is actually quite a good solution. It's not perfect, but with a bit of imagination I think it works nicely as a lore-friendly way for this build to actually function. The mill itself is owned by Gunhelm, a notoriously moody resident of the village who is a bit work-shy, preferring instead to hire whoever shows interest in giving the role a try. He's a bit abrasive, demanding non-stop hard work from his assistants. Next up is the Apothecary. This is another build theme that lacks a lot of relevant decorations without mods, but alas, hopefully we can remedy that. This is a reasonably sized build with 2 stories, and I'm aiming to make the build a little different from the others in the village, with a slightly more sharp and pointed design. I was tempted to go for a design that seems a bit darker and intimidating, but I wanted to strike a really fine balance here. A dark, occult apothecary, as cool as it would be, wouldn't suit this village too well, and even though Merelda, the owner, does dabble in the darker arts from time to time, it's far from her usual body of work. Merelda is a fairly reserved individual. You'll rarely see her at the tavern, and even in the town hall meetings she lurks towards the back of the hall, but she is passionate about potions and herbs. She's fairly shy, but fulfilling orders and contracts in her apothecary keeps her quite content. Alongside the main building, I decided to add a garden to make it feel more authentic. Fortunately, there are plenty of herbs, fungi, etc. already in the immediate vicinity of Skylake Village, but I thought it would make sense for Merelda to cultivate some of her own crops. Therefore, I'll be constructing a garden on the right-hand side of the build, including some of the natural mushrooms on the ground, with some planters for growing lotus, aloe, hops, some beehives, some water troughs, and more. Finally, the Carpenter's Store. This is another quite simple build, a small 2-storey design that doesn't have much space on the interior but includes a large exterior front yard. The store is designed as a sort of working home. Levan, the carpenter, often works hand in hand with the blacksmith, providing wood for his various creations, and the blacksmith also provides the carpenter with metal for his creations. The carpenter's workshop is nice and quaint, there's nothing too special, and it fits nicely into the village as a modest place of work for an equally modest carpenter. I used wooden support struts in front of the build, something I don't regularly use, and they worked pretty nicely for this build. They provide a bit more of a framed style that works really nicely on the entrance veranda. It also turns out you can place wooden fences between the gaps, which you can't do with any of the snappable fences. They actually clip really tightly with the support struts, which works really nicely for this design. The carpenter's workshop is quite nice, however, strangely, Levan seems to have gone missing. Bohran, the blacksmith, went over to deliver some metal rivets and found the house empty with no note, the braziers still burning and the wood left unworked. Where exactly has Levan gone? We'll have to see how this story unravels. So finally they're all decorated and we're going to go visit the new stores. Entering the village, I've established some light defences around the village, including small watchtowers at the major entry points. Massive defensive walls wouldn't have suited here, but I think this style looks nice. Heading down towards Lakeway Walk, we'll start off with the Blacksmith store. This is Bohran's domain, a warm, cosy storefront boasting all sorts of metal goods and a small variety of well-crafted weapons. This store also includes an exterior workshop where Jarell is working on his smithing skills, and a small living space upstairs. There's also a hole in the floor here so Bohran can keep an eye on the storefront, and it provides a nice place for him to rest from the day's work. Next up is the grain mill. On the exterior there are some carts and wheelbarrows from the latest delivery, and inside Gunhelm watches over his latest recruit as he arduously mills grain. This is his third assistant this week. His abrasive nature and lack of desire to do any of the real hard work himself kind of rubs people the wrong way most of the time, so this assistant probably isn't going to last long either. The mill is quite nice, providing some light storage options and a hollow upper ring on the first floor, with 3 tall grain silos at the back of the mill holding all of the processed grain. Heading over to the Apothecary, I'm pretty proud of this store. It's a unique design in a really nice spot, and the interior uses its space well. Initially, the counter was going to be much further back, but I instead decided to push it forward to give Merelda some more room in the workshop. Inside you'll find all sorts of resources and utilities for crafting potions, alongside workbenches towards the back. The workshop is quite cluttered, but intentionally so, and it makes for a really nice apothecary, even without the modded decorations that usually make themes like this so much better. Upstairs is Merelda's personal workstation and bedroom, a quiet place where she can relax. Heading through the back door, we gain access to the garden, a lush paradise for any apothecary where various flora can be grown for use in potions. Finally, the carpenter's store. Levan has been missing for about a day now. Bohran found the house empty, like he'd just disappeared. The store itself is very modest. Levan doesn't have many earthly possessions and is quite content with his role as a carpenter. Some of his wood remains unworked and his braziers are still lit, so he clearly didn't plan ahead to leave. Where do you think Levan has gone? Let me know in the comments below. And there we have it, Skylake Village now has some more stores. I'm sure Adalbern won't be too happy. He was raking in a good amount of coin with his general store, but now the residents have some options for what they want to buy and where they want to buy it from. I hope you enjoyed the builds. It's really fun to see Skylake Village coming together from just a modest general store to now a fairly large village. There are still a few more things to do in Skylake Village and around the outskirts, but I think we're definitely in the final stretch of Season 1 of Settlers. If you enjoy my content, all the links to my Twitch, Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Host Havoc affiliate page, NordVPN discount and NordPass discount are available in the description below. However, of course, you can simply just leave a like, a comment or subscribe. Any of those are very greatly appreciated. Patrons get a bunch of nice benefits, including sneak peeks of videos, your name in every video, custom made wallpapers in 1080p and 4K resolutions, full-size build blueprints, Discord roles and more. On that note, a massive thanks to our patrons Sadialot, Randar, Connor, Ivy, Torn, Ill-Fated, Coffeeman04, Alfric and Eagle Rose. As always, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.